Before going to costovertebral joint, the costovertebral joint is formed by the articulation of the rib with that of the thoracic vertebrae. So now we'll see the some of the features of the typical rib. So each rib has two ends and with a shaft, and it is having upper and lower borders and outer and inner surfaces. So this is called as the anterior end, and this one is the posterior end, and this one is the shaft. Okay, it is having two ends and a shaft, and it is having an upper border and the lower border, upper border and the lower border, and the two surfaces, one is the outer surface and another one is the inner surfaces. So these are the ends and the surfaces of the typical rib. Now the anterior end is oval and concave. Anterior end is oval and concave for the articulation with its costal cartilages and with its articulation with its costal cartilages. Okay, and the head has two facets and are separated by a crest. You can see here. So the head has two facets, superior facet and the inferior facet. So and this one is separated by a crest. Okay, and the superior facet is smaller than the inferior facet. The inferior facet is large and the superior facet is small. So the upper smaller facet articulates with the higher vertebra, whereas the inferior facet of the head of the uh, rib articulates with the corresponding vertebra. That means numerically same vertebra. For example, if you take this rib as, if you consider this rib as third rib, so the inferior facet of the head articulates with the third rib, whereas the superior facet articulates with the inferior facet of the higher vertebra. So this is the thing how this rib is articulating with the vertebrae. Okay, and the neck lies in front of the transverse process of its own vertebra. So the neck is present. So I have told that consider this one as third vertebra. So the neck is lies in front of the transverse process of its own vertebra, and it is having two surfaces, again anterior surface and the posterior surface, and two borders, superior and the inferior borders. Okay, the anterior surface of the neck is smooth, whereas the posterior surface is rough. The superior border is thin, the inferior border is rounded. Okay, the tubercle here, the tubercle is placed on the outer surface of the rib and at the junction of neck and shaft. The tubercle is placed on the outer surface of the rib at the junction of the neck and the shaft. So its medial part is articular, the tubercle. The medial part is articular and forms the costo-transverse joint. So this one is articulating with the transverse process of the corresponding vertebra. So the lateral part is non-articular. Okay, here the shaft is flattened so that it is having two surfaces, that is outer surface and inner surface, and two borders, superior border and inferior. We can call it as upper border and lower border also. Okay, the shaft is curved with its convexity outwards. So this is, the shaft is curved with the convexity outwards. Okay, so this one is having convexity. Yes, and then it is bent at an angle which is situated about 5 centimeters lateral to the tubercle. So it is bending 5 centimeters lateral to the tubercle. Okay, and it is also twisted at the angle, and this one at the angle the shaft is twisted. Okay, so the outer surface, the angle is marked by an oblique line. The angle is marked by an oblique line here on the outer surface, directed downwards and laterally. Directed downwards and laterally. The inner surface is smooth and covered by the pleura. The inner surface is smooth and covered by the pleura. The surface is marked by a ridge which is continuous behind the lower border of the neck. So behind the lower border of the neck, so the surface is marked by a ridge. So that ridge is continued from the lower border of the neck. Okay. So this is about the main important parts of the typical rib, and it is also having a groove in the inferior border. So the costal groove contains the posterior intercostal vessels and the intercostal nerve. The upper border is thick and has outer and inner lips. So this is about the important features of the typical rib, but we are very much concerned about this anterior end and the posterior end, and with that of the costal tubercle. So the main these 3 points, 3 areas forms the costovertebral joints, costotransverse joints and costochondral joints. Okay, in the next video we can see the articular facets of the thoracic vertebrae.